Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Shroyer, a career positioning strategist, professor, and someone who spent a lot of time thinking about what it really means to grow in a world that just won't stop changing. Welcome to the Technically Human podcast. This podcast is about navigating your career, your identity, and your next chapter in a world that's shaped by AI, technology, and constant change. Here, we're going to talk about real stuff. We're going to talk about career pivots, uncertainty, reinvention, and mostly how to stay grounded in who you are while everything around you evolves. Are you ready to go? Let's dive in. Welcome back for another episode of Technically Human. I am joined today by special guest Kristin Zhivago. So, Kristin, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Kristin, before we jump in, just give a little insight into who you are and some of what you do today.
I am a revenue system architect. So, what we do as a company is we find the sales stoppers, the things that slow buyers down. I've been basically dissecting and trying to fix the buying process ease for companies for a long time. The whole thing is to make it easier for them to buy. Written a book on the subject, Roadmap to Revenue, how to sell the way your customers want to buy. And I do this work now with the team behind me that is able to help me ferret out the sales stoppers. Most of the time, it's internal processes or things that could be managed better. For years, I called myself a revenue coach because I was doing marketing and sales turnarounds for companies. I started my career in Silicon Valley. I was 17 and I was selling machine shop tools. I think I was the first woman in the country to do that for a Pratt & Whitney distributor. And I learned some hard lessons. The first lesson was you better know what you're talking about. It's not enough to go in with a catalog and a miniskirt. Back in those days, that's what they just gave me, a catalog and said, wear your miniskirt, you'll be fine. And some old guy came out and said, okay, honey, why are you here today? Because they'd never seen a woman do this before. And I told him, and he said, okay, how is your drill bit better than the one I'm using now? And I couldn't answer the question. So I went from being a very full of yourself senior in high school to just a dog with her tail between her legs, going out to my car. And I thought, I'm going to learn everything I can about tech and selling. And I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. I love it. I listened to another podcast that you were on and you talked about selling rocks out of a red wagon.
Yeah, Girl Scout cookies and greeting cards.
I love hearing that. You started really young.
I did. And they weren't great rocks. I just realized much later in life that the ladies in the neighborhood were very sweet. It was them, not me, that made it work.
All right. So, Kristin, one of the things that you talk about on your website and some of the different podcasts, the material that you have is assumptions versus human truth. And I know that you've interviewed hundreds, probably thousands of consumers now and found out that the truth behind why they buy is very much different from what entrepreneurs, small business owners, those who are selling the products think that they want to buy. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and it's true of even the largest Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies for whom I have worked. They, even with all that money and all that research, and even now today with AI, they're just stalking customers and basing what they think the customer wants on what the customer's doing, their behavior, and some of their characteristics. But if somebody followed you around for 2 weeks and just said, oh, this is the store that she goes to, and this is where she gets gas, and she only shops on Wednesdays, they wouldn't know something I call the buyer's mindset, which is the mindset of the buyer when they set out to buy your specific product or service. And that's one of the tricks here is there's no such thing as a generic purchase. Every company is different. Every product or service is different. The promises people make are different. And everybody thinks they can use AI or whatever and get this sort of generic, pablum, homogenized stuff. And I use every AI every day, so I'm not just bashing AI. But you can't get the mindset of the customer when they set out to buy. And the last thing I'll say about that is it consists of their desires, their concerns, and their questions. That's it. What do they want? What are they worried about? Because they've been disappointed in the past. Every single buyer in the world has been disappointed in the past. And this is really true of software, by the way. I don't know how many programs I've gotten and said, oh, okay, this is great. I'll try it out. And by the next 45 minutes or whatever, you're like, oh man, it doesn't do this one thing I need it to do. And you have to just turn around, go out there and look again. Or you find it out after spending $100,000. And one of my clients did that once with a company he hired. And towards the end, after spending that much money, he realized that they couldn't make their product, their software, work with Outlook. And Outlook was at the core of all their communications.
Oh,
Just
wow.
wasted all that money. That is not uncommon, especially when you look at ERP systems and really complex business systems. It's a virus in the industry and nobody talks about it. It's a real sad thing. So anyway, they're very concerned because they've been burned. And then if you pass those two hoops, if they say, oh yeah, they get what I want and they're addressing my concerns, then the last thing they will do is start asking very specific questions, which, by the way, salespeople are not trained to answer. They want to do their pitch. And the customer is way past the pitch by the time they're asking you questions. So the whole system is broken. And I am just determined before I kick the bucket to get the people to start realizing that their own customers will tell them what they were thinking when they set out to buy. They can actually reverse engineer a successful sales process. So
Yeah.
we try to get rid of the sales stoppers, the things that aren't doing that job properly. And once we do that, we help them with systems. I have an IT background. A lot of people on my staff have an IT background. We have partners with IT backgrounds. And we just go in there and fix the systems and the processes. And then we build campaigns to bring in new leads.
So, quite a few years back, one of the things that came about, and I remember I was looking at this when I was in a corporate role, is loyalty cards in some of the different stores. And I have a lot of fun talking to my marketing students about like that and what kind of data they're pulling in and things like that. But I'm guessing that the loyalty cards were an attempt to get to know the consumer better. Do you feel like that helped with any of that desires, concerns, or questions? Or do you think it just added more questions or more data that, convoluted what they were trying to get to?
Before the sale is different than after the sale. So the data that you collect before the sale, so you understand what they were thinking before they bought, is very different from after the sale. After the sale, you can then personalize offers. You can say, oh, you were looking for this last week. There's another version of it that's just come out. Or you bought these last month. Amazon is brilliant at this sort of thing. Here's what other people bought who bought this. By the way, Amazon is miles ahead of every other business in the world. Maybe Walmart comes close, but Amazon is way up there. It feels every week they sit down and they say, okay, how can we make it even easier for people to buy? Okay. Let's show them what other people bought. Let's let customers answer questions. Very simple questions that manufacturers should have answered. Like, how big is it on the outside? Okay, it holds things inside. How big is it on the inside? I've answered those kinds of questions for other customers. And also just what goes with it and just the reviews, everything they've done has made it much easier for you to make a decision. And other companies in the world aren't even close. Not even, oh, geez, they're so far off, especially in the B2B market. So the data helps you personalize the experience for somebody who's already buying from you,
Mhm.
and then they'll be more likely to buy more from you. But those are two different things. And I also need to
Yeah.
bring up relationship marketing. When that first came out, I have a lot of respect for the people that put that together. They did a marvelous job of getting that out into the market, Peppers and Rogers. But when it first came out, I thought, this is the seller's dream to have a relationship. The customers do not want the car dealer showing up for dinner. We don't buy to make friends. We buy to
True.
get a need met or a desire satisfied. And we don't care about relationships. That is what the seller wants because they think they can make more money because now they have a relationship with you. It's a crock. It really is a crock. So it's more about serving the customer and trying to just do a good job of giving them what they want as it pertains to you. And there's a lot of depth there that people are not mining at all. They're just putting out brochures on their site. And now all of this is changing, of course. AI agents are going to be buying for human beings. It won't change the desires, concerns, and questions that the human beings have, but you will be doing this whole clickless. You advertise online, and either the chatbot doesn't even pay attention to it or they don't go to your website.
Right.
And now you're just bots selling to bots. And it's going to be an interesting world.
Now, do you feel like with the onset of AI that companies may not have to go out to their consumers because they can type into a chat GPT or something like, tell me the desires of my customer, my ideal client. What are their concerns? What are their questions? Do you feel like they're hitting close enough in using those tools? Or why
No,
would they still need to touch the
because
actual consumer?
they aren't asking real customers what they were thinking and what they did. Now you could say, oh, they could survey. That's another crock. Surveys are your thoughts put into a questionnaire. It's not an open-ended conversation. And you mentioned I've talked to hundreds. I've actually interviewed thousands of customers for hundreds of companies. And I ask very open-ended questions. I also can hear the doubt. So it'd be very hard for an AI bot to ask a question and somebody says, it was okay. But then the bot will say, customer says it was okay. I would say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a resounding yes. And then the customer's thinking, oh, she actually heard me. Okay, good. I trust her more now. I'm going to give her more information. So I think there's a human, going back to your theme, there is a human aspect to this. And it boils down to actually taking care of your customer.
Mhm.
It's respect, it's treating them the way you wish people would treat you.
And I'm guessing so many of the companies that you've worked with, they just in general, thinking about some of the people in different companies that I've known, they don't want to take the time up front. They feel like it's going to hold them back. But how much time, energy, and even sales revenue could that save them by taking that time up front? And the second part to that is, does it really take a long time to
No, it
gather that
doesn't.
intel?
Here's the thing that's interesting. You only have to interview 5 to 7 people of a given type. You could go overboard and talk to 10, but it will do nothing more than confirm the trend that you started to see by the third conversation, the fifth conversation, and by the seventh conversation, you're like, yep, yep, all of the, and now remember, I said of a given type. So if you're a B2B seller, you would have to talk to, let's say, top management, the big decision maker, and middle management, and then maybe the user. Okay. So you might have three, or the purchasing people. You might have several audiences. So you have to talk to each given type. The phone calls typically they used to take an hour, but people are getting pretty efficient about communicating and just saying what they say. So they usually take about 30 minutes. Sometimes they run over. I always have the people in the company introduce me, or the CEO of the company introduce me to their customers, so it's easier to get a response from them. You still have to start with do emails to a lot of people, like 3 times the number to get the 5 to 7. But that's all it takes. You don't have to survey a zillion customers. Siemens hired me once to interview 40 engineers. And I said, guys, you're wasting your money.
Goodness.
I'm going to know by the 10th conversation what's going on. Please don't do this. And they were like, we got to tell our higher ups, the board of directors or whatever. So I did, but by the 10th or 15th interview, I started adding a section at the end where I said, I've heard this other thing from other people, some of the ancillary thing, and I'd like your thoughts on that. So I gave them some additional information, but it wasn't the core, it wasn't the real thing that makes you the money.
Mm.
Now, when you say how much are they wasting when they don't do this, I'd say 80% of their marketing budget
Wow. That's
because
significant.
the message doesn't resonate. If you go to a website and you're looking for a very specific thing that does a very specific thing, you don't want to have to hunt around. You want them to answer those issues, be very specific, make it easy for you to make a decision because they gave you the right information right away. If people don't do that, they're creating a message on their website and their social, and they're spreading it everywhere. And people are just like, that's not it. If you don't get me, no, thank you. But if somebody comes out and says, I bet you're tired of this, and it really is something you've been sweating over and worrying about, you're going to click or respond to the social or whatever it is. The difference is astounding. People are just wasting, they're just throwing money up at the wall and saying, okay, we think that like this and do that and everything. And so we're going to assume, and it's a mistake. It's just a mistake. It's sad. I've been worried about this my whole career. That's why I'm in business. I actually started in Silicon Valley recruiting engineers for about 5 years. And I learned the kind of companies they wanted to work for, what the culture should be like. And then I went and visited the companies so that I got a great education doing that in tech because I saw how things were made. But I had to match them up. And we did. We actually had a full fee 3-month guarantee, which was unheard of in the industry at the time. But the reason we'd ever had to up it, do it, pay it out, was because I really did figure out how those two things came together. Same thing is true of buying and selling. You have to understand what people really want. And it's not, oh, I want to be richer or I want to be sexier or I want to be happier. It's not that vague. It's really, do you have a sinus problem? It's like that. You get up in the morning and you have to blow your nose for 2 hours. Okay, this is a very specific issue. They just, oh, it's so sad. So anyway, it doesn't take long, doesn't cost that much, some thousands of dollars, but something that most people can afford. And I come back with a conversation report, which is word for word transcriptions that are anonymized
Okay.
and broken up into categories so people can speak freely and they hear, and the people who read it read every word. And then I also create a summary and recommendations report. And that says, okay, let's bulletize this. Let's look at the big trends. Here's the most important thing that everybody said, or even the top 3 things. The reason all this started, by the way, is I would sit down with clients when I first started working with them and say, what do you think is important to your customers? And they'd have a list, 1 through 10 or whatever. And then I'd go out and interview customers, and the list was completely different. So they were just wasting all this money because it's an ego thing. Oh, I know my customers. My salespeople are out there. One of my favorite stories about that is a CEO said that to me once. He said, I don't need to interview our customers. My salespeople are talking to customers all the time. I said, okay. When was the last time you told a salesperson what you were really thinking? And every single time the CEO would go, oh, okay. Nobody tells you what they're thinking when they're buying because they're playing poker. They're negotiating with you. I've
Right.
had salespeople sit in my office and give me this big long pitch. And then at some point they were complaining about management or they gossiped about something or the salesperson said something offhand that was a really big no, big flag. Oh man, oh geez. And you shake the person's hand. You don't want to stop and say, because he's going to try to talk you out of your objection. And you don't need that. You're done. So he goes out, tells his boss he's made the sale and everything looks really good. And you go back to your computer and start looking again. It's a gap. It's a really big gap. And it's a waste.
Fair. What would you say in all of the consumers that you have interviewed, what was like the biggest aha that you came across or that you've seen from what consumers really want?
Again, it's very specific. Somebody selling an enterprise resource management, an ERP system or something, is the reactions are be completely different than when you're selling lipstick or something else. So it's hard to answer that question. But I will say it does boil down to the company not understanding exactly what the customer wants. And because they didn't pay attention to it, the service is bad. They get frustrated. They go through voicemail hell instead of just getting some nice person on the phone who directs their call. I helped introduce voicemail back in the day in Silicon Valley, and I've regretted it ever since
Oh,
because they turned it into a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through.
right.
And if what you need doesn't fit into this is a perfect example. Press 1 for this, 2 for that. What if my solution doesn't fit into either of those buckets? Can you please let me say agent and I get or hit 0? Oh,
Which is
it's
now
just
commercials and memes and all kinds of things. Representative, representative.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're doing my bank does this where they put you on hold and then they do commercials and for the bank or they say, "If you check out our website," and I'm like, "I already did that, idiot. I'm on the phone because I couldn't find the answer." It's very bad. Yeah. So no, there isn't there's a gap. The gap is the thing. It takes on different forms, but it reminds me of that song, "You Don't Know Me," the way back when. Here I am over here and you're over there and we're not on the same page. Yeah.
So when we think about desires, concerns, and questions, can you just lightly touch on each of those and what are some of the things related to each of those categories?
Yes. By the way, there's 4 types of products and services in the world based on the amount of scrutiny that the customer applies to the purchase. So there's light and all the world's products and services fit into these categories. I figured this out a long time ago. Light scrutiny is I see it, buy it. It's a candy bar at the checkout counter. I have 2 questions. There's nobody else involved. My questions are, can my waistline afford this? I forget the other one because I don't usually, if you really want it, you buy it. That's low scrutiny. Medium scrutiny is like buying clothing. You have only a couple of questions. Nobody else is involved mostly. The prices go up, of course, with all of this. Heavy scrutiny is cars, houses, big software programs. It's anything that involves a salesperson and a contract and that kind of thing. And then intense scrutiny is all of that, but you get married. It's a long-term contract or it's a service that goes over a long time or you're buying a jet, somebody, Boeing or something, making a jet for somebody. So the sales methods that you use for those are completely different. And I spell them out in my book. I make it really clear. Here are their questions. Here's who's involved. Here's what satisfies them. Here's how you sell to them. And people make another big mistake, which is they sell a light scrutiny product like it's heavy. They do a newsletter on how to chew gum and things like that. Or they sell a heavy scrutiny product like it's bubble gum. Big mistake. All right there, you've lost the customer. They know which one. They know interestingly enough, when I give a speech in person somewhere in the world and I say these things, everybody knows where their product fits, but they still act inappropriately when they go out to the market. They're still not in sync with the customer's buying process. Anyway, so desires are what you absolutely have to have. It's the thing you're looking for that meets a certain need. The concerns are anything that you've tried before and you've been burned, like the software thing, but it's also specific to that item. What if I put it up here? How long will it last? Will it fit? There's a lot of fit things in Amazon and stuff that people don't pay any attention to. But will it work with this? Or I bought this before and it wasn't any good. And people get a lot of help from other customers in the reviews. There's a big scam going on right now where you look for a dress or something, and there are these gorgeous AI generated pictures of these women in these embroidered dresses with 12-inch waists.
Uh,
And and everything's got third dimension on it. The embroidery comes out. It's just gorgeous. And there's a really good picture on Facebook or someplace where the woman is showing that beautiful image and what it really looks like. It's just a printed dress with from you could buy it at a resale store or something from the 1960s. It looks like a muumuu, if you remember what a muumuu.
right.
So that's really there's a big concern about that and the quality of things. And people saying I used it for 2 weeks and it broke. You get that from reviews. You don't get that from the descriptions. After you
Right.
buy this, it will break in 2 weeks. They don't write that in the description. And then your questions, once you've had your concerns addressed, this is your concern, and the company should say, "We know that other companies have done this thing, and it's really been wrong. We hate the fact they do that, and so what we've done to prevent that is this." Okay? One of the big mistakes people make when they have things made in China or any offshore location is they don't have a man on the ground checking the quality randomly, just showing up and saying, "Oh, look, let's see how you're doing with that particular product," before it's shipped. Because once you
Right.
get them and they're scratched up or the holes don't match up or whatever it is, you're talking at 6 to 8 weeks before you can fix the problem and your lead times get really long. Anyway, that's concerns. The questions are, okay, now that you've got my attention, I think you might have what I want. Now I want to know what are some of these go, no go things, these gating things. Like, does it really fit here? Will I have to use this kind of thing to work with it or whatever? How long will it last? All of the questions that people have that are very specific to that product.
Right. And that's what, as you're going through those, and you talked about how Amazon does really well, I do think about that because I think, like in Amazon, a lot of times you can ask a question. I've never done that to see like how long it takes to get a response. The reviews, I think the hard thing with reviews sometimes can be, do you take it with a grain of salt? Because do people just do a review because they're mad and they're ticked off that something didn't work versus people putting in good reviews? A lot of companies have contests where you put a review, like a 5-star review, and they get entered for a drawing. So is it real or not? So it's playing that game. But the other thing that's nice on Amazon is I've seen where they say this is an item that is commonly returned.
I
And so
noticed
when
they
I'm
started doing that this year. Yeah.
yeah, so when I'm looking at
There's
like 2
another
different
thing.
items
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna have to return it, so let's go to this other
Yeah.
alternative."
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's yet
Um,
another thing that they figured out that
yeah,
turning off my phone. I forgot to do that. It's just one other thing. And who would have thought of that? Every time I
yeah,
go there, which is way too often, I notice something else, some little thing that they've started doing. And you're right, that was one of them recently.
yep. So in your book and then on your website, you talk a lot about sales stoppers. So can you talk about 1 or 2 of the common sales stoppers that you're seeing and how companies can move past those?
They're everywhere. Again, it's very specific to a company, but the common problems are some of the ones that I think I mentioned earlier, the legacy software systems where they're stuck with something. It would be way too hard to replace it, even with AI help. And so the process is convoluted. I just did one for a client where each department, it was a manufacturing company, each department entered data about the parts that were coming in to be used in inventory. And then when they said, okay, because they have a very popular product and they've got to make sure that the inventory stats are correct. But it's entered like 4 times, 4 different places by 4 different people. It goes through a spreadsheet in one case and
My
another.
gosh.
And by the time you get to the end, you think you have this many and you don't. You have that many. And which one is right? There's the source of truth is not the same. Okay, so that's a really big problem. And that's just back end. See, one of the biggest issues right now, I've been in tech since before the PC. Okay, so the digital voltmeter was one of the first digital things that came out. And that guy was my next door neighbor when we lived in
Oh,
Southern California. And it's amazing how much the systems have failed to meet the needs of people because the managers of the companies are not technical. They come from finance or marketing or and they do the best they can and they're smart people. But business owners and CEOs are not technical experts unless they're engineers or programmers and they start the company. It's more rare. That's more rare than it used to be. So what you deal with is people who are trying to make good decisions, but they're getting data that isn't helpful. For example, programmers will say, "Oh, if we do this, we'll need to use this program. We should use this one." They have their own reasons for saying that. Maybe it's the one they've always used, and that's the one they're familiar with. And okay, that's the one we're going to, because I know how to work in that. They can also have a friend in college who started a company. This happened to one of my clients, and they said, "Oh man," and they were thinking of doing partnership together. The VP of one company versus with this other guy who's running a software company, and so they install this thing into this, and it turns out it isn't even close to what they need, but they're stuck with it. The process, I have told people that there's 5 or 6 tools to keep your promises. That's what marketing is. Marketing makes the promises for the company, and the company either keeps them or breaks them. And if you break them, your reputation, you're always fighting your negative reputation. You'll never get that wonderful leverage that happens when you keep your promises. So one of the research things that we do is figuring out the promises their customers want them to keep, that they can keep, and then we fix the processes and systems and people that make it actually work. Keeping your promise requires passion. You have to really want to do it because it's hard. Usually founders are pretty passionate. Products and services, they're usually pretty competitive. I haven't gone into a place that said, "Oh, this is a terrible product." I've just been lucky that way. The people are usually pretty good. If they're well managed, they're really good. So that leaves your processes and your policies. If you're not a jerk and you run a company, your policies will be good. They'll be fair. You'll take care of people, customers, partners, and workers. So it leaves processes and systems. And that's where everything falls apart. People are running too fast. You said they don't have time to do this research. Same thing happens with the diagramming of your current systems and how many times people enter things. I just had a meeting with a client about this. I did some internal interviews, and there was no question at all that this was their biggest problem to meet customer needs. They just weren't all aligned. It wasn't smooth. When I started this company in 2017, because of all my revenue coaching work, I knew I had to start with processes. And so I hired an infrastructure manager who also doubled as my app whisperer so we could get the best cloud applications because I run my whole app company on the cloud. That's the most important thing. Jeff Bezos figured that out. He doesn't sell a product or a service. He sells an infrastructure. And he's gotten so good at building it that he just scaled like crazy. That was really smart. When he first came out, I thought to myself, wow, this is the first time I've seen somebody start with the infrastructure. And who cares what he's selling? Books, doesn't matter, clothing. He's just sells the world now. People paid way too little attention to that. And yet it's really the most important thing that helps you keep your promises and satisfy customers and workers.
Now, do you think especially in the last maybe 5 years or so, where AI has been like blown up even more, that businesses are using it, I want to say correctly or to their advantage? Are they using it the right way or are they going about things wrong? Because I'm guessing there are many businesses that are looking, how can we improve our processes, take away some of these menial or administrative tasks? I'm also surprised I'm not hearing it from more businesses. But do you think those who are starting to dive into the AI realm and use it, are they going about it in the right way or are they missing big things there?
That's a good question. I think the biggest problem is they're trying to boil the ocean. And the way you start using AI, we started a discussion group in LinkedIn, AI for business owners. And I did it because every single AI expert was saying the same thing. Start small, look at the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that's really broken, and then try to fix that. The issue is, and by the way, the truth is coming out that the ROI on AI is like 1%. It's not very impressive at the moment. The whole business world is beta testing this humongous software thing, and we're learning how to prompt. This is the first time that anybody can get the computer to do what you want with plain language. You don't have to know C plus or Python or JavaScript or any of those things. It helps when you try to integrate it. This is when things get tricky. When you start saying, okay, I've built this module and we're building applications. One of my workers used to be an application builder and an IT expert, and she's really enjoying building apps within a week or two. But then they have to work with the other things that you have. And that's not always as easy as you would think. Then you have to get some Java programming in there or some Python or something like that. So it's more complicated. And the other thing that's scary about this, number one, it has no conscience. So you have to build that in because business is based on trust. And if it doesn't have a conscience, that's a real problem. And the second thing is the people who made it or are making it have no idea how it works. You can see, I've watched a lot of videos that say, okay, here's how this all works. You start with this, then you build on that, and then you network that, then that's how you scale it out. It's interesting, and I'm a nerd at heart, but you can't really say, why is it when I ask this question, how does it answer? How does it find that answer? And then how do you keep it from making mistakes? For a year and a half, I've been asking it how to sail upwind. And only because I'm an ocean sailor. I've been out there a long time, 50 years sailing, actually.
Wow.
And for the longest time, about a year, it was giving instructions. And one of those instructions would put you on the rocks. So I thought, okay, I'm very careful about how I use it. I use it every day, but there are things it does really well. And it
Okay.
has become a wonderful tool for saying, why is this? And how does this work? And for tech support, it's out of the world. You can say, I'm trying to do this with this application. I can't figure it out. Okay, here are the steps. It's
Yep.
absolutely fantastic for that. And market research, wonderful. Writing, not so good. Images, getting better every day.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
basically wiped out the digital marketing industry, which was my industry, till we started pivoting and making more use of my revenue coaching work.
Yeah.
Big
And I would
tsunami.
Yeah. I would say in the classroom too, it's been interesting from a university perspective because as a business professor, I introduce my students to it. It's in the business world.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to say you can't use it at all. And at first, I had students when they started to use it, or maybe they played around a little bit and they're like, this thing knows everything. And then we start to put prompts in there, or I show them examples. And I'm like, I tried to fast track some research by give me like 10 articles about this topic, whatever the time frame is. And I said, it gave me a list. And I said, I went to look up and every one of those was fake. I said, you cannot depend on, and they were like, what? So teaching them too, like, how do we use this in a way that is going to be helpful and good and still getting them to have that creative thinking on their own too, not
Yeah,
just
it's a
depending
little
on it.
scary. I feel like parts of our brain are just saying, oh, you don't need me anymore,
Right.
especially for the younger generation. And I fear for them, especially if the grid goes down or that people are attacking the hosting companies now, Azure, AWS, and Cloudflare in the last
Right.
several months. It's been massive. And
Yeah. They're paralyzed. They don't
I
know
know,
what do I do? How
I
do I
know.
do anything?
No
Yeah.
internet, I have no
Yep.
life. It's just,
Better go
yeah.
back to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody going back to bed is not good for the world.
No.
Yeah.
All right. So, Kristen, as we wrap up, I have one last question for you, and then we'll share a little bit more about how everyone can find you. But my question is, what does being technically human mean to you in today's business world?
I think I told you when we were talking before that I'm writing a new book, and the book is called Love, Leverage, and Logistics: How You and Your Company Can Change the World. I start with love because I define love, and I was married 45 years very happily to my husband who died of cancer, but the last day we were still in love. Okay. We figured it out and we got it right. And I believe that love is simply taking care of somebody else. That's it. And you just do what you can. There's no line, there's no boundary. You say, I'll do this, but if I don't ask me to do that. You don't do that when, especially when somebody gets really sick, like my husband did. He had fatal cancer twice, and the second one finally got him. But you just do what needs to be done to make sure they're okay. And psychology calls that codependence and says it's really bad. I got news for you, it's not. There are people who take advantage of it, but that's rare. If you get married to somebody nice, they're going to try to make sure you're happy and you're going to try to make sure they're happy. And those are the marriages that succeed. And it's true in business. You figure out what the person really wants by asking them. What a concept.
Not guessing.
Not guessing. That's right. And then you do what you can to give it to them. And they will know that you're doing that. That babies know that from the first time they come out of the womb. They're like, oh, that person's feeding me and changing my diapers. This is good. That lady that comes in and pinches me on the cheek and says, oh, you're so cute. That's not good. Our little jerk meter gets defined really easy who's caring for me or not. And then leverage is just if you do all those good things, people will return the favor. And logistics, which is taking up a lot of the book, goes back to everything I've been talking about, processes and all of that. So I think that's the human thing. The thing that a machine cannot do is understand what you want, give it to you. And I know AI is doing that. They're learning more and more about us and everything. But there's something about a heart to a heart, not just a mind, but a heart. I really care enough to wait, think, work with you, be patient, and not worry all the time about my stuff, but let's try to come to an agreement so we're both happy. I think that has to be part of business. You take care of your customers and your people and your partners.
Yeah. And I think there's so many examples of different companies where we've seen them do that so well too. And other companies where you're going back there, you're going to tell your friends to go back there,
Yeah,
all of that.
exactly. You're exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Kristen, thank you for being on the podcast with us. And I would love for you to share for anyone listening that's interested in learning more about you, connecting with you, purchasing your book, if you could share a little bit more about where they should go to get more information.
You can Google me. I come up and page after page because I've been writing so many things for so long. So there's that. Our website is called zhivagopartners.com. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and other Quora is one that I contribute to quite a bit. The book is available on Amazon, and it's in Kindle form, audio form, hardcover. It's actually better in hardcover because when I do the buying process dissection and tell how those things work, there are columns, and it works a little better than an audiobook or a Kindle. But anyway, so that's basically it.
Thank you again, Kristin. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me and with our audience, and wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for listening to the Technically Human podcast. If you are navigating a career shift or you're just feeling like something needs to change, remember you do not have to figure it out alone. Learn more at www.careercompossusa.com. And if this episode helped you in any way, sharing it with someone else might help them too. I'll see you in the next episode.